She was a big girl, but she started having these issues with her bladder, with her bowel movements. And you'll hear that when they moved into that vehicle, when they started living there, those accidents got worse and they came more often. She wasn't letting the defendant know when she had to go, and she was creating a mess each time. And that rage, the defendant's rage that you'll hear about in this case, grew and grew. And he would hit her, he would strike her each time she had one of those accidents. And that was Harmony's life. For 10 days. For 10 days, she lived in a car. For 10 days, she had bathroom accidents. For 10 days, she was unable to control her own body. For 10 days, she was in fear. She was scared because each time she had one of these accidents, the defendant would hit her. The defendant that you saw 2 days ago, a large man, he would hit this. She was 35 pounds in June of 2019. This again is in December. She was tiny. He would hit her. He would strike her with a fist over something she had no control over. And those accidents were getting worse, and they were coming more often. And she was so bruised before her murder that the defendant had to hide her when he went out in public. He would literally take a blanket and cover her up so that she couldn't be seen, and that so no one would know what he had done to her. No one would see those bruises. And that brings us to December 7th of 2019. That day began like any other day for Harmony. They were living in that car. She woke up and she was scared. She was scared because she'd wet herself. She didn't want the defendant to know. She'd wet herself first thing that morning, and she was afraid. And just as she feared what happened, the defendant smelled what she had done. And for that, he hit her. He struck her in the face, and he drove his car. He continued on with his day as if he had done nothing. He struck this little girl in her face, on the side of her head. He continued on as if nothing happened. He drove to the methadone clinic, the clinic that you saw yesterday on The View. And there he and Kayla took turns getting their treatment. You'll hear that Kayla went in first, the defendant stayed in the car, and then the defendant went in. And when the defendant came back to the car, he was hungry. And so he started driving the family's car to the Burger King that you saw yesterday on The View. And as he was pulling out of that parking lot, he smelled something. He smelled that Harmony had had another accident. And that rage that had been building inside of him, it was there. Remember, he was still upset about the earlier accident, that first thing in the morning. And he looked back at Harmony as he was driving, and he said, "Really, Harmony? Again?" And he began striking her. As he was driving, holding onto the wheel, he began punching this little girl repeatedly for something she had no control over. He struck her blow after blow after blow to the side of her small head. And he didn't stop. And you'll hear me say that. He didn't stop. He didn't stop with that first barrage of assaults, of strikes to her small head. He continued. And when he pulled up to a light, he continued hitting her. Hit after hit to her small head. Blow after blow. Now, during this barrage of strikes, Kayla, who was in the passenger seat, seated next to the defendant, seated in front of Harmony, she put a hand up. She tried to block what this defendant was doing to Harmony. She tried to stop him. You'll hear that in that moment, he looked at her as if to say, "You're next." And she was scared. And she looked forward and she put her hand down, and those strikes to Harmony continued. And when he pulled up to another light as he was driving to that Burger King parking lot, he continued striking her. And after that last strike, he looked at Kayla and he said, "I think I really hurt her this time. I think I really hurt her this time. I think I did something."